Hey everybody.
Hi everyone.
In in my attempt to be smart with OBS and try and like line up the next thing to jump to, I accidentally jumped to the next thing. So guess what? You get us a whole
A
minute
whole
early
extra minute.
with a mysterious 10 seconds of no audio, and you're thinking, wait, are these guys even talking? Do let us know in the comments if you can't actually hear us.
Yeah.
Um, because that'll be really really fun if we're just talking to ourselves. I mean, Jake and I can hear each other.
I can hear
Classic
you.
those guys. Yes, indeed, indeed. If we were involved in some sort of war, we'd probably be the charming but ineffective side that loses.
I'm anti-death.
You're anti-death.
Does that mean we're too loud?
Wait, are we too loud or are we too quiet? Um, there isn't a like button, so I can't go hit the like button if you think we're too loud. um, it's all good. Good. No, you think it's fine? Well, I'll tell you what I think. I think it's also fine. So today is another day. It's Tuesday. It's 8 p.m. We're back.
It
We're
is now.
back on our regular schedule, which nobody probably knows that we actually have a regular schedule, but we
We do have
do.
one.
I just said schedule two different ways. Far out. 8 p.m. Tuesday nights. Promise we're not going anywhere for a little while. So we should be able to stick to this. Yeah, and the random
And a
Thursday.
random Thursday.
Thursdays is like our backup night.
Yeah.
So what's happened since we last streamed, which was last Thursday? I think the main bit of amusing news was some Australian political parties got hacked.
Yes.
Uh, I saw an article saying they think it might be the Chinese, but I like to think, and I'm basing this off a tweet I saw on Twitter. I forget who tweeted it, so I can't credit them. But something along the lines of by state-sponsored attacker, they meant 15-year-old, and by critical zero-day vulnerability, they meant an unpatched WordPress plugin. Which is probably the case. Why would you waste your good 0 day when there's probably some unpatched piece of garbage? I think I saw somewhere else that Shorten had said something along the lines of, well, there's not much we could have done to prevent this because, we need this data to be able to run our campaigns and stuff like that. But we don't have the time or the money or the people to look after it. I'm like, well, if you don't have the time, money, or people to look after it, should you even have this data? Of course, as someone at work pointed out to me today, we're dealing with the people who make the laws, so they probably won't go too harsh on themselves. So
Yeah, exactly.
probably won't see, yeah, we probably won't see any useful sort of outcome from this, other than we get hacked, and when we have our elections, I think it's in November, we'll have all the drama like the US had, where it's like, oh no, they were hacked, or influencers, or I don't know, maybe there is like some compromising emails that'll get released, and we find out that, Tony Abbott's really not as conservative as he makes out to be. He's like, I'm actually pro-immigration. Oh, Tony, better keep that under wraps. Anyway, enough about Australian politics. Although I think everyone on the channel at the moment's Australian, so
Probably. Yeah.
you get it. My screen, geez, spent so long talking. Cool. So today, jumping into other things, we're doing a box called Giddy. The latest box, or one of the latest boxes to be retired. Last week, I forgot which one we did. Was it White Puffy, Jacob? Was it Dab? It was Dab last week. We did Dab
last week, yeah.
Um,
And Giddy was the one that got retired this weekend.
Yeah, I'm not Australian either, Morkwalker. I just sound like it. I'm from the proud nation of New Zealand. Represent all fellow Kiwis. That's one guy, because he's. I don't want to dox you, man, but you're also from New Zealand. Anyway, so Giddy's our first box. We'll start with our usual kind of approach, which is we have a box that we know we can reach, but we don't know what interesting things there might be to poke at. So we start an mmap scan. Mmap can sometimes take a second to run. Because it's got to run to all the ports naturally. Let's up the verbosity. Effectively, Nmap, this particular style of scan, it just scans common ports. That's what the SC is from memory.
No, it's because we didn't specify the ports.
Okay.
So by default, it'll do the top 1,000 ports.
Okay. Jacob knows it. But effectively, they've done their research to figure out what the 1,000 most common ports are. So it doesn't just look between 0 and 1,000. It'll 8080 as an example is a common kind of secondary HTTP port. Okay, so what have we got while that's going? That's for later because you know what? I did my research to make sure we were going to have a better run of it this week than we did last week. So I'm going to kick off a more thorough Nmap scan just to check if there's anything else. So this one checks all ports. So that should hopefully come back with something extra. But what we've got port 80, 443, looking at the web server, IAS10 and IAS10, that's probably the same process, just listing on two ports. 3389, which is Microsoft Terminal Services or Remote Desktop. And nothing else shows up in that one. We'll see what the other one comes back with. So the first thing we want to jump onto is, let's just see what that website has. Yes, the box is loaded. I reset the box a while back, and we found that it takes a while to restart. We have a doggo. We could go and see if there was anything hidden in this image, like we have on some other boxes. In this case, we know there's nothing. So at some point, I think one of our other streams on YouTube, or the last one we did that I need to put on YouTube, has what we did to go through checking if there's anything hidden in an image.
Yeah, Dab had some.
So we're not going to worry about that. So our next step is to have a look at GoBuster or Dirbuster. They're the Dirbuster and GoBuster do the same thing. Dirbuster is written in goodness knows what. GoBuster is written in Go. So it's a bit faster.
I think Dirbuster is Java.
Yeah, okay. So effectively, we're going to try brute forcing to find directories on the web server and files on the web server using our directory list, which always seems to work. It's a CTF, of course it works. And a bunch of random file extensions. So we'll get that started.
Random. That's a targeted list at a Microsoft IIS web server.
Yep. But so I missed that there for a sec. I was looking at something else.
The random list of extensions.
Yes. Yes. So if this was running PHP, we'd search for .php, .html, and .text, and whatever other extensions we thought might be on the server.
Yep.
For example, let's say there's a bunch of audio files and we wanted to grab, you'd search for .mp3. In our case, given it's IAS, ASP and ASPX commonly sit on IAS servers, I think, because the integration with .NET's pretty straightforward, and ASP. So we have our first directory back, you can see, called remote. Oh man, just fighting around with Windows. I've got two monitors now, and jumping between the two. Is that cut off? Can you see that last row there?
Yeah, it's cut off.
Okay, so what's happened is OBS does not like the dimensions of my screen, so I'll do this. Right, so we've got one directory so far. So let's have a look at that. Remote. Now, using my ESP and knowing right now we don't have any credentials for this, and there's really no point in trying to pop this for the minute, but it is interesting. When I first saw this, I was like, this can't be a thing, but apparently it's a Microsoft feature that gives you an interactive web PowerShell prompt. It's restricted, but it's still there, so it's an interesting one. This GoBuster is still going, so what I'm going to do is save us the pain and just jump ahead. The other directory it finds it's interesting is called MVC. MVC is Jake knows more about this stuff than me,
Model
but
view
it's a
controller.
.NET web framework, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a one built by Microsoft.
Yeah, it is.
There we go. It just found MVC. So this thing isn't necessarily that fast. One of the interesting things with GoBuster, where is it? -T is the number of threads, and it's set to 150, which is tuned for the hack to boxes, so you don't make them fall over. But it's relatively quick in the real world. When I've done like pen tests, realistically, you can set this to like 5, maybe 10 threads for speed before you start hitting some bit of infrastructure somewhere rate limits you. Or their test environment falls over because they're running multiple test environments off like one server. Okay, so we've got this thing. Let's just go for a bit of an explore. Okay, which shows us products. Interestingly enough here, it takes input arguments that probably do something. Apparently, I'm still logged in, even though I've reset this box.
That's interesting.
Which means there's probably another vulnerability where you can just set yourself a cookie and it'll treat it like you're logged in. So I'll click register and register a new account so we get the full experience. Unless the box didn't reset. Maybe the box didn't reset. Username, those guys. Email address, those guys at somewebsite.com. Password, Bob. Let's see if I can type that properly this time.
Bob.
I was struggling last time to type that. I don't know why I suppose we could have checked for SQL injection there. Knowing the future, we don't need to, but in theory is probably vulnerable as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of the input boxes are.
That's a pretty weak registration process. Normally, you'd want to validate an email address. Then again, in the retail context, sometimes the sale is so important or so sensitive to being disrupted that they don't want you to confirm your address.
Sometimes the UX cult wins.
Yes. Yes. Model view controller. So it's interesting, as an architecture, model view controller, the model is the representation of the object or the like row in a table in a database.
The data, yeah.
The controller handles business logic and processing on that model, and sometimes it's really just a marshaller to get the model from the database to the view. And then the view is the display logic. But in the sense of it doesn't necessarily render the HTML. It sometimes just formats stuff that can go somewhere else. So in an API, the view is really just a bit that pumps out the JSON. In some frameworks like Django, it's all super compressed. And so really in Django, you build the model and the controller. And then the view is just that kind of, what's it called in Django, Jacob? That Ninja template or Ginger template. That's the...
I haven't really used Django.
It's this kind of templating language, and that's the view. Whereas in other things, the view is more of an explicit thing that you kind of do in the main part of your code. Anyway, so enough dilly-dallying. Let's try something. Or 1 = 1. The most noobish SQL injection possible. That's a good sign. Unclosed quotation mark. So something is not being properly filtered here. In this case, in theory, the quotes should be balanced, but there is potentially a reason for that, and that is easy enough to show if we just enter the string A. We get conversion failed when converting the varchar or varchar, never knew how to pronounce that value, A to an int. So effectively, there's no sanitization going on here. This is getting dumped straight in a query, and the database is going, I've expected an integer value, and I got a string or a character. So that is good. So if we go 7, and then we should be or 1 = 1 -- I think. Yeah, we get everything.
Yeah, that's right. The
Yeah. So
They've turned on remote exception pages as well, which is very nice.
yes. So lesson to learn here in terms of application security is suppress default errors. I mean, the ideal case is you flick a general 404 to the user with an oops, something went wrong with like some places call it a current correlation ID, but effectively you generate a long GUID or UUID, and you then correlate that in your logs as well to go, I've generated this UUID for this error, so that when the person kind of contacts you and goes, I had this problem, I got this reference code, you can go and look at the logs, find it, and see what happened.
Yeah.
That's the ideal case. Getting there is difficult, but the idea is you want to show as little as possible.
Well, that's the thing. It's not in .NET. Like if you get a developer that doesn't use Entity Framework and Elma, then or hasn't even heard of those, then you probably don't want to hire them. They don't know
Yeah.
what they're doing.
The other thing to bear in mind, depending on the framework, so with Django it's different, with Spring Boot it's different, with Struts it's different, is some of these things you suppress the errors in your own application code. So you might have a section where you're defining configuration, and in other ones it's like more like system configuration or framework configuration or even web server configuration to suppress these errors. The other thing you can do as well, as this is more for legacy applications that you know no one's going to fix, is if you've got a reverse proxy or a web application firewall, sometimes you can catch these errors on those on their way back out, and they can. So F5 certainly can. F5s are a very expensive corporate network appliance reverse proxy thing, but they can catch those error pages and send something generic to users and log, hey, I saw this error page instead. So that's the other option. So there are a few ways to stop it, but you've got to look out for that. And it's really easy to do, especially when you're a dev and you want debug mode on. One of the things you have to figure out is as you're moving your code from dev to test to prod, is how do you manage to change the config between the three without accidentally ending up with debug config making it to prod.
Which again, if you're in .NET, essentially, they have a thing called web config transforms. So you literally specify what your config will be for every environment, and when you deploy, you don't have to worry about the case of accidentally screwing up your leaving debug info in your web config. So that's another rookie mistake, I guess, in terms of this app specifically.
And when we say rookie mistakes, these are mistakes that we've made at various times.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Or it stays on the to-do list to make sure that you get rid of it before prod. I mean, I never take an ideal approach when I'm trying to get something working. It's not until I want to publish it that I think about this stuff. But understanding making a decision early on can affect how easy it is to fix later, as well as the thing to consider there. Anyway, so we've got some form of SQL injection. We could try playing around here to try and get more advanced queries going so that we could get a list of the tables or run additional functionality. But in order to simplify things for ourselves, and this is one of the few legitimate times where I'd say using a tool is useful to solve this problem for you, we're going to use SQL map to grab us all of the databases, like the actual component databases in this main database. Just purely because all of the marshalling you have to do takes forever. So that returns super quick because I already had the flush session. I already had done this before, so it's just used my cached results. But if I flush it, so it clears it, it's going to run. While that's running, I realized I just completely went over the nmap, the all ports returned, and we got one additional port. WSMan. Not a clue what that does. Again, predicting the future of this stream, we don't actually need to worry about it. Presumably, it might be a way in, but not the way we.
Could be an alternate path, yeah.
Yeah. This takes a little while to run because it sits there, builds queries, tries a bunch of different techniques. I think you can see things like, so it's detected it's MS SQL. It thinks there's a WAF IDS. So heuristics detected. So IPS and IDS are intrusion prevention and intrusion detection systems. They sound fancier than they really are. They just either look at network traffic or activity on a server that it thinks might be suspicious. So it's basically like antivirus, but for behaviors like looking at processes accessing certain files or certain commands being run or certain connections that look suspicious. In this case, there probably is nothing because nothing gets blocked. This has just picked something up and thinks there's something like that on the box. And we're finished, and we've got 10 tables. If you do this, so in the write-up, Jacob's got 14 tables. When I first did this, I got 4 tables because I hadn't registered. So you might get a different amount of tables back when you do this, depending on if you've reset the box or if you've registered an account or done some other stuff.
Yeah, I noticed it adds those OAuth tables. If you click, when you go to your profile, there's a link in there that says learn how to enable OAuth or something like that. And if you click that link, it adds those tables to the database, which is interesting.
Right, so now I'm just telling it to query the users table. So one of the things in Capture the Flags is they put... I had refreshed the box. That's a weird way of like handling sessions. The fact that my last session was valid, even though I've reset the box. Yeah. Anyway, sometimes CTF authors put interesting things in the tables. In our case, that's just the user I signed up with. So there's probably nothing here. But the next step is MS SQL and I think other database, certainly MySQL as well. You can write queries that run system commands. So SQL map will give you an SQL shell that lets you have some limited ability to execute commands against the server.
Well, so this isn't a OS shell.
No, this is an
SQL
SQL server
like
shell.
Microsoft SQL Server command line, yeah.
And from that, you can run some commands that execute changes on the actual system. So this one took a bit to fathom out. So there is this... I'm going to chuck up the article here. So there is this undocumented feature in MS SQL called XP_dirtree. Given the name, I'd say that's why it's undocumented. They've left it
been around a while.
They've left it in for legacy reasons, but it's probably not even officially supported, but it still works. But effectively, this lets you interact with the file system on the actual server. So this is a stored proc. So a stored procedure is kind of like a predefined function that you can call from a query or a command shell. They're actually a really good way to sanitize input. So if the products website we were just looking at used stored procs everywhere, those would filter the input so that my or1 equals 1, rather than being seen as part of the SQL command, is just seen as the string or1 equals 1. It will try and process that. You go, I don't like that because that's not a number, or I don't like that because I can't find that value in the database.
Yeah.
But it would fail safe. You might get an error back that, entity not found, but you don't get, I own your box. Okay. So anyway, we've got this random feature here. And so this particular article talks about using it to check what files are in a folder or something.
Yeah, local files.
But we can combine that with the fact that you can use this to attempt to mount an SMB share or a Samba share or a network share if you're in a Windows network. Heck, even my home network, I've got a NAS that's just SMB. It's a pretty common protocol. So we can abuse this by... let me... it's decided to go through my entire history rather than just the history in this tab. Grep. 2608. History is a history combined with grep is a great way to find something you've run in the past, as you can see. At one stage, I was trying to get an exploit working from exploit DB, and at another stage, this was that from a couple of weeks back.
That was Dab, yeah.
A couple of streams ago. Not Dab, the one before that.
The one
that
before
I did,
that,
yeah.
that you did, yeah.
With Razib, yeah. Okay, so what this will do was this will run an SMB server on my machine. And what we're going to do is tell MS SQL on this server to connect to the SMB server now running on my machine. And what will happen is the user that MS SQL is running as will then attempt to connect as itself and assume that I'm some sort of Kerberos aware service, and it'll give me an NTLM hash, which is very convenient for me. So, because with an NTLM hash, we have the ability to ascertain the user's password. So if I jump back over here to the SQL shell,
Windows is also very commonly vulnerable to pass the hash attacks. So even
Yes.
just having the hash can be enough.
Yep. So a pass the hash attack.
Yeah.
So imagine you've created an application and you decided to do client-side hashing in your JavaScript before it goes to the server. So a normal user types in their password, doesn't realize their web browser hashes it, and then the hash just gets passed to the web server, and the web server validates it. You as the attacker then managed to get hashes from the database. You no longer need to crack those to figure out what the original password was, because the application will just take the hash. So you can skip the whole JavaScript web client part of the password calculation. That's a super simplistic example that I don't think exists anywhere in the real world. But effectively, that's all they are, is once you've got someone's NTLM hash, you can abuse it in some cases, which is a bit of fun. Anyway, I'm going to run our command here. So master.sys.xp_directory, and then that's the address for your box when you did this. I forgot about that. That's the IP address that was in the that's in the write-up. So let me just get the one I need. Come on, Notepad. Not Notepad. Visual Studio Code. Over here, and here, and here, and here. And we wait. We get an error, and that is all fine, because if you look at this, so we have the user, the box, and the NTLM hash. So what we're going to do is I'm going to pop over to here. So I've put that in a file on my Windows box, and now I am going to remember in OBS which thing it was that shows you what I'm about to do. Come on, OBS. There we go. Apparently, so if you click on like the top bar of OBS, it doesn't move it into focus. That's quite annoying. Anyway, so we'll jump over to CMD, and you should all see that. Come on.
You can see it.
Yep. Sweet. I've got this on my phone as well, so I can check it's going all right. But if you can all see, it switched over to CMD. And now I'll go back to CMD, which has conveniently disappeared. Again, thanks OBS. Okay, so now gonna run hashcat. So I've put the hash in a file called Giddy_hash. So I just copied that entire thing, running it against the RockU password list, which is what, like 100 million passwords or something? It's a lot of passwords.
Something like that, yeah. It's a huge amount.
-M is mode, and 5600 is the mode and hashcat for NTLM version 2. So we're going to kick this off, and my 1080 Ti is going to get this done nice and quick. Done. So that's our password. So hashcat kind of shows you the original hash and then drops the password there. How long did that take? So 10,000 kilohashes per second. That's a lot of hashes. Not the fastest. Certainly, the GPU boxes in AWS can smash hashes. But anyway, we've got our password, so I'm going to jump back to this one, and hopefully that all jumps back. This is the fun thing about streaming is you're like, has the technology worked?
Yeah, it worked.
Sweet. All good. All good. You just get to listen to me be unsure about everything. Okay, so we've got the hash, so we don't need this anymore. We don't need our SQL shell. Let's ditch that. Radio, next step is to use that somewhere. So we had somewhere to use that, and it happened to be, was it /remote, right?
Yes, it was.
Very interesting. Okay, so we've got a username, we've got our password. Let me make sure I've got the password on my clipboard so I can just paste it. Far out. Selecting stuff in CMD is not fun. Username is going to be Giddy/Stacy. And the password is that, and the computer name is Giddy. And what's an optional connection settings? Nothing particularly interesting. Authentication type. Oh yeah, some interesting stuff there. Use SSL. No, that is not. Okay. Yes, that's interesting. Anyway, I wonder if this is like Windows remoting going on. I'm not a Windows guy, so.
You might be able to use like a PowerShell remote library to connect directly to that port.
Yeah, so there is like Windows remoting. Anyway, this is an interesting feature in Windows. If someone ever says they're enabling this, just say no. Like,
tell them not to.
WMI remoting or WMI or whatever it is, I think. So the PowerShell level Windows remote stuff is probably like necessary. You want to be able to like SS. It's basically like SSH, I suppose, in a way. This, I just look at this and I'm like, ugh. The fact that it's exposed via HTTPS or HTTP even is just begging for someone to accidentally misconfigure this so it's available from their house. Anyway, so we're in some sort of PowerShell prompt, so we can run commands, not particularly fast. Unify video, okay. We can cd desktop, because on Windows boxes, for Hack the Box at least, that's where the flags are. And I'll do an ls, and user.text, 32 characters long, which is how long the flags are. I don't know what head is in PowerShell, so I can't just be like, show the first 8 characters to prove that it's there. But it's there. We normally don't like to show them, because if you want to go and get the flags, I mean, these are retired boxes, so you don't get points on Hack the Box. But you can go and do it yourself. I mean, heck, all you really need is you got the username and password for the user, so you don't even have to do the stuff we did earlier. But if you want to learn...
Oh, there you go. It's GC.
So what was that?
It's GC in PowerShell.
Ah, good.
Yeah, GC user.text -head and then the number of characters.
-head 8.
Say 8, yeah.
Running.
It might be a new feature that's not in this version of PowerShell. It doesn't say what version of PowerShell it's in,
anyway,
but probably not this one.
So I suppose it's time to do a little bit of double checking. This is like a restricted shell, so there's a bunch of stuff you can't do. But if we go cd
.txt.
What was that? Oh. Okay, yeah. That just shows you where my brain is.
There you go.
Okay, you know how we were just saying we don't
that clearly works well.
Yeah. It wouldn't be, as Mork Walker would say, it wouldn't be one of our streams without that happening. So,
well, according to Stack Overflow, that's the syntax.
Stack Overflow isn't always right,
No,
guys.
it is not.
Certainly, the first one isn't always right. um, um, okay, so if we do a bit of enumeration,
Oh no, kill the feed. It's fine. It's
no,
not
no,
rude.
no, 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 no. It's too late. It's on the internet, Jacob. Once it's on the internet, you can't take it off.
Oh no, someone's clipped it.
Really?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. I was like, wow, quick and desperate. It's like not gonna get you anything. So let's see what apps we have on this box. Program files. Okay. This is PowerShell.
You can tab autocomplete and it escapes the spaces for you.
All good.
Yeah.
So we've got LS. Bunch of stuff. SQL Server. But nothing else there that looks Windows NT. Anyway, nothing else that, for the purposes of what we're doing, looks particularly interesting. Far out.
There is an alternate path that we didn't take to get a reverse shell using Microsoft Visual Studio, but we didn't have to do it because you'll find out later.
Yeah.
Uh,
Because the way we roll, boy.
way we roll.
Yeah. It's your boy. Anyway, we've got the other program files as well. Files. x86, ls. Yeah, it's basically a similar set of things. Nothing particularly interesting. There is another place to look that is interesting. Bear with me. So if I go back up and go, oops. Oh, that works, apparently. Why do I not have program data, Jacob?
What do you mean you don't? Because it's a hidden file.
Oh, of course. Ignore me. I'm a dumbass. CD program data.
Box, yeah, exactly.
Um,
Never deploy Visual Studio onto the server that actually runs the web app as well.
Unify video. So I noticed in there we have a folder for something called Unify Video. It's just a handy quick Google. So we have a local privilege escalation. Oh, that looks sexy.
That sounds exactly like what we want.
Unify IP video management surveillance system designed to work with Ubiquiti. So Ubiquiti's like that. It's the same. It's the Wi-Fi company, right?
Yeah, they do Wi-Fi stuff.
Yeah. Is installed there and also shipped with that service. It's executable as that. However, the default permissions on the Unify Video folder are inherited from C program data and not explicitly overridden, which allows all users, even unprivileged ones, to append and write files to the application directory. So they're looking at the ACLs, and users have permissions to do stuff. I think read and execute, create, and something. I forget what these all are, but effectively we can do stuff. Upon start and stop of the service, it tries to load and execute the file at this directory. However, this file does not exist in the application directory by default at all. Interesting. By copying an arbitrary taskkill.exe to that path as an unprivileged user, it is therefore possible to escalate privileges and execute arbitrary code as that, which is the user that tries to run that executable when you restart the service. So effectively what we have here is the service that, so I think it's this thing, that when it's closing down, it will run this, probably because it cleans some stuff up neatly. However, that doesn't exist, so there's probably some reason, like debug reason maybe, that they use this. They never removed that functionality from this. So this thing will try and find that, or the service will try and find that. It doesn't exist, so it'll gracefully fail and move on with its life. this wouldn't be a problem if we couldn't write to this directory. But this says we can, so we can double check this ourselves by running the same command. So I will go and do that. So let's have a look. I did something there that made it double whatever, but who cares? Yeah, we've got the same permission, so we can do stuff. That is great. So, right, now what we need to do is get an executable to that location with that name. So this involves two steps. One, what are we going to use for an executable? What sort of reverse shell might we use? And have we ever created one before? The answer is yes. I had the stream 2 streams ago was all about that. And then the second step is how do we get that onto this box? So step 1 is fairly... Actually, we'll go with step 2 first. No, we'll go with step 1 first. I've decided, Jacob.
That's fine. We can go in any order. It all ends up with the same result.
Okay, so I have written, and this is on GitHub. Oh, crap. I have written a reverse shell.
Oh, you got spammed for cat. That's funny.
So what was that?
Um,
Oh, wow.
Spamming caps gets you an auto ban. Let's see what we can do about that. Nightbot. Hang on, let me fix that up.
We'll see if we can unban poor Jimmyson.
It said they only get a timeout for 5 seconds, so they should be back. Just message us if you're back, and otherwise we'll see if we can figure out how to unban you.
Oh, maybe it's just chat, banned in chat.
Yeah.
Just show starting Go Buster. We forgive you for that too.
Yeah, okay, cool. He's unbanned from chat. Let me fix that up.
Cool beans. Far out. So OBS, right? I keep trying to bring it to the top so I can see what's going on, and it doesn't like being brought back to the top. Probably because it's designed for streaming.
Yeah, probably. Caps are disabled, so you should be able to spam whatever you just spammed because we missed it.
Yeah, go for it.
Even for me as those guys user, it just says message deleted, so I've got no idea what you actually spammed.
Anyway, while that's going on, based on a blog post where a guy was talking about writing reverse shells for Windows that bypass a lot of like malware checks, and something that's simple and lightweight and easy to compile, and small. So the created a reverse shell. It's on our GitHub. I'm sure Jake can paste the link into the chat. And that includes links to the guy's article where he writes up. It's a whole series that I've been meaning to go through. And I worked on this to do some like automated kind of owning a box a couple of streams ago when we had nothing else better to do. So what I'm going to do is I am going to... my history. I am going to compile this. So I think it was attack_host is me equals 10.10.14.3. I made a make file because I went over the top. So you just run make and give it a couple of variables to compile with properly. So it's attack_port equals our usual 14-year-old port name, leet. Cool, and then we move to the build directory, which is where I stuck it, and that's then where we've got our we run our quick HTTP server to try so that we can pull a file in. So this, think of like running this as like a reverse web server. So the idea is I'm on a box and I've got some sort of command execution that restricts me from sending files. In this case, I can't send a file. I could probably base64 this file and copy over the base64 and then debase64 it here as well as an option.
In PowerShell to debase64.
Yeah, but it's probably just simpler to do it like this. So this is how I'm going to get the file over. On top of that, there are tons of ways in PowerShell to copy over data. But in our case, there's only one particular command or one particular commandlet, PowerShell command, script thing, whatever they're called in PowerShell, we can use because a lot of the other ones have been disabled.
Yeah, we didn't run into this firsthand because this was my default go-to.
Invoke web request, which is what we're using,
Well.
is the thing I've used in the past with PowerShell as well.
Yeah.
Find all our elite hacks at that one. Nice, good one, Jake.
Yeah.
Jake's the only one who uses the Twitch bot.
Someone has to. Poor little fella.
To my IP. Fingers crossed. Bam. Okay, that copied over, and as you can see, we got a request from the server. Next step is now to pop shell. So NCLNVP1337. So Netcat, handy. It's like a Swiss Army knife of TCP communication. I wrote a receiver file for my Python script for my reverse shell, and the amount of tedium I went to get that thing working, and the ease at which Netcat makes it work is annoying.
Yeah.
Okay, so now the final ingredient in our recipe of popping shell is we need to restart that service, like it said in the exploit DB. So restart -service -name. So this just goes to show these restricted shells don't really help. So what we should see is yes, connection received. Bam. How do you check what user you are on who am I?
Yeah, who am I?
We are bam system. That's what I like to see. Okay, it was Nightbot that banned him, right? Anyway, you're unbanned now. You can. We never meant to ban you. Oh man, undue censorship. What are we becoming? Anyway, so if we go back here and then users administrator desktop and go bam, we have root.txt 32 characters. This time I'm not going to even try anything fancy to look at that file. Just take it as read. There's root. That's how you get it. There is another way around this. So there is like app locker on this box, which in our case, so app locker really just looks at, I think it just looks at executable names. So because we overwrote that executable with our own, it worked. But there's a whole other way to get around the app locker stuff. So we kind of stumbled through the really easy way to do this. But Jake had been speaking to a guy who had to go through a more complicated kind of path through. So I might hop it over to you, Jacob, to kind of explain.
To run through the MS build way.
Yeah. Oh well. Or just to talk to it.
It's on our so.those guys as well.
Oh yeah. This is our Confluence. But I keep forgetting
that are yet to come.
That we have a so dot. Those are the guys. Yeah. Check out this quality 1998 style theme. I'm really proud of this. Like, man, it's just look at that. The dot slash, the green text with the slight glow, that background that probably looks absolutely potato once it's gone through some sort of like video compression. This just speaks to my heart. Not enough flashy GIFs. Yeah, you're right. It's not so much 1998 as like 2004. But it just oozes. Look at us. We're hackers. Anyway, um, there's this whole section down here. Um, you can get an earlier, you can get a reverse shell. Is another way to get reverse shell is use a is to use there's an MS build vulnerability. Oh, this is the thing to do with the CS proj file.
Yes.
So
Yep.
using .NET or Visual Studio when it's building to run other arbitrary.
Yeah, so if
things.
a CS proj file, which is just an XML document essentially, if it has some shell, there's a template up there. If you scroll up a little bit, there's like this is a template to execute shellcode from a CS proj file. So it's all pretty standard, and then you add shellcode there. And when MS Build attempts to build the project file, it will actually execute that code as well. So I haven't actually dived very deep into what this does in the background. I just tested it to see if it worked, and it does.
It looks like you're basically inlining some code and saying compile this.
Yeah, and I think what it does is run it from memory. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then, so I think that's how it bypasses a lot of the protections.
Anyway,
but basically, you can generate shellcode with MSF Venom, or you can convert existing applications or binaries into shellcode so that they run in there. You copy paste your shellcode output over the top of that shellcode variable, and when MS Build tries to build that CS proj, it'll execute that shellcode, and if it's got a reverse shell in it, then bam, you'll get a reverse shell.
So target name hello. Class examples, a self-closing tag / target looks like a self-closing. No, wait, self-closing's on that end.
Yeah.
Where's the opening? Oh, target there / target using task class example code task factory assembly file. Okay. Task. Okay, so this is basically. I think this is basically like where you can define build tasks, and then you can get it to
do something on build.
Build more C#. I mean, we got a bunch of kernel 32. That looks like it's setting up to do something because like our C kind of does similar stuff.
Yeah, so it's importing those DLLs as part of the build rather than
IP thread attributes, IP start address. That's all very similar. And then it just dumps the shellcode straight into memory. So that's already like machine instruction or assembler or something. Right, something fairly low level. And that's just dumped straight in and then run. Okay, cool. So this bit compiles and then this injects this somewhere into memory. At a high level, I think that's what it's doing.
Yeah.
It's another interesting way to get shell on a box. But we had our way.
It's one of those things that's a feature, not a bug or not a vulnerability.
Yeah.
So
this is the lesson to learn here. Don't install stuff on a production server.
Don't install build tools on a prod server, definitely.
As someone else said, like who I work with, like so if you have a CI/CD pipeline, you're using Bamboo or Jenkins or something, and you've got build agents.
Yeah, it has its own. Yeah.
He said build agents make great shell boxes because they've got normally some processes running as root and just tons of useful utilities to be able to kind of set yourself up and branch further into the network. So you've got to protect those things and not make them publicly accessible. Or Dockerize them and super restrict what people can do so they can only do the bare minimum. Yeah. But it's the same as like if we were in this restricted shell here, and certainly there's like bash equivalents. But if Python existed on this box, we could just run Python, and then Python can do everything what that PowerShell can do. There's no restrictions. You're running with the user's full permission, so you can do whatever you want within that user's permissions rather than what PowerShell's trying to restrict you to.
Yes.
So there's all sorts of ways to bypass this stuff. Anyway, that's kind of the end of that one. It's nice. This one's more on the realistic end. I think they even show that here with that little diagram that was bigger last time, but it's decided to shrink. Yeah. Um, far out. So it's more on the real life end of things. And I'd say not too dissimilar to stuff I've seen. Probably more out of like a development or testing server than actual prod,
Yeah.
where they've either shoehorned multiple test environments onto one server, or there's other stuff on the server that shouldn't have been there, or leftover builds, or the permissions aren't right. But there's probably stuff in prod that is equally as shocking like this.
I'd never seen that PowerShell web interface before, but I have seen build tools and Visual Studio and source code installed on
Yeah.
prod servers. Definitely.
So one of the other ones, like in a Linux world, is generally not having GCC installed on a production server, so making sure compilers aren't installed, just because that's one less tool for someone to use. Same with Java, not having the software development kit installed.
Just having the runtimes.
Yeah. Can you do that with Mono? Just have the runtimes, or do you have to have the compiler with it? I don't know. Presumably, you should just be able to have the runtime with Mono. But ideally, you want to remove tools like compilers from production. What else? I mean, what else did we stumble across that was interesting? SQL injection, like user framework, entity, or
Framework, yeah.
yeah, entity framework. If you're in Java land, I think Hibernate, Python. What's it called? SQL Magic, I think. Is it SQL Magic? But there's tons of them. Object relational mappers or database frameworks, whatever you want to call them. They abstract away the need to write direct queries unless you absolutely have to.
Yeah.
That session thing with the cookie was a bit weird, but
I didn't notice that before.
that was.
So
I'd argue though that was probably lazily thrown together to be deliberately vulnerable to SQL injection, and as a side effect.
I think when you look at the error page, that yellow screen of death we were getting,
Yeah.
the file's location is like C users, OWASP top 10, OWASP examples, something. So I think it's like
It might be one of the deliberately vulnerable apps, and
yeah.
you just find stuff, and they're using that so that you can do this. I've tried to write a couple of deliberately vulnerable apps. I just get bored after a while. Actually, no, I tried to write a deliberately vulnerable Python app, and then found that SQL Alchemy, not SQL Magic, I found that SQL Alchemy was so good at preventing SQL injection that I couldn't reliably get it working.
.NET MVC is the same. Like you have to go to significant effort to make SQL injection work or to make a lot of these vulnerabilities actually work.
Yeah.
Box, it does a lot for you.
Same with crypto. I was involved in a test where they were using super old legacy crypto rather than just something that comes with .NET. They had a good reason to. Their app was fairly old and they'd slowly evolved it over the years, and the point at which they had switched to .NET, which was I think in the mid-2000s, where .NET didn't have an encryption library, so you had to do these like DLL imports and write unmanaged code, and they just never updated that because they never had to.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a case of use something someone else has written that you trust, and that's the hard bit. You got to figure out if you can trust it or not. But yeah, especially with crypto, the number of times I've seen hashing schemes that involve one pass of SHA-1, or it doesn't matter if it's SHA-1 or SHA-256 or 384 or 512. The fact of the matter is, like, SHAs are designed to be CPU efficient. So they're relatively efficient to crack as well. So, doing 10,000 operations slows that down. Salting means that if every single user has a different salt, I need to orchestrate that and then test against every salt and every password, which just adds time and means I can't use rainbow tables. And you'll know the salt in the database table, so you don't have to check against every salt, but that breaks rainbow tables. Using a key stretching algorithm for password hashing is another good option. So PBDFK2 or Argon or think it's bcrypt, as well as another option. Key stretching basically takes a normal string and munges it around enough to be suitable for use as like an RSA key or an AES key. And as a side effect, is a good format to store passwords in because it's not CPU efficient. So your website might only have to handle 10 authentications a second. Your attacker has to try and manage, in my case, 10,000 kilohashes a second. If I've got to then also do 10,000 rounds of dehashing and munging stuff around, that's more CPU cycles. I suppose the final thing to mention, if anyone is still watching, is anyone out there? We've got a contact email address now. I think you might have seen it in the stream chat if you're interested. If you want to flick us an email with the email address you want us to register you to Slack with, you can join the Slack channel we have. So Jake's just done it. We don't want to use your email address for anything other than if you want to join the Slack channel.
We will literally do nothing with it except send you an invite to Slack.
Yeah, and then we will delete your email. Also, feel free to not use your main email if you want. I was a member of another Slack channel that had some kind of grayer types of people, I suppose you could call them, and like it was actively like, don't use your personal email address. We're not thinking that it'll ever end up like that. I think I am signed up with my personal email address. Slack marketing, yes. If you do want to use
it more of a positive community than a nasty place.
Yeah. But yeah, if you don't want to get Slack spam in your personal email address, use a different one, or just use your normal email address. I don't think they even show up. I had to double check because I use one of my personal email addresses in our Slack, and I couldn't see my email address. I couldn't see yours. So anyway, that's there if you're interested. It is a little bit of a semi-ghost town at the moment, but maybe a few more people and it'll be a bit more of a discussion about stuff.
Yeah.
Good. And that probably ends us there. Thanks for watching. I think our timing was better this week. What's the time? 9:01, an hour and 2 minutes because I started a minute early. So, yep. That's it for this week. Have a good one. And we'll see you next Tuesday, I suppose. Farewell.
See ya.